Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Financial Services Spotlight session on our presentation today on TISA's Universal Reporting Network powered by Atos. My name is Adrian Davis, and I'm Global Head of Markets for our Financial Services and Insurance Consulting practice. Now, Turn is a highly innovative, neutral digital platform based on blockchain technology that is intended to revolutionise the collection and dissemination of regulatory data for the European asset management industry. I'm joined today by David Dalton-Brown, who is CEO of TISA, the Investment and Savings Alliance, and also Nikhil Chouguley, who is Global Head of Product Governance at Deutsche Bank. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, so please use the Q&A function to post any questions that you may have, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end of the session. But let me begin the presentation formally by handing over to David.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and welcome to everybody. And thank you to Atos. It's great to be here today. I'm going to cover now the background to TISA and why we developed Turn. So hopefully you can see the slides, but the background is very simple. TISA has a mission statement that is very simple and relies on us developing industry solutions that improve consumer financial well-being. We're very strongly growing. We have over 200 member firms that represent every segment of UK financial services. All of the major banks, the investment companies, the major distributors, all of the major infrastructure companies, as well as the associated service companies that support the UK financial systems ecosystem. Over the years, we have been asked by our members to develop a series of digital solutions. And as a result, we have become the preeminent provider of industry solutions. The history goes back to when we formed the TISA Exchange. The TISA Exchange was actually the results of the FCA asking the industry to improve consumer outcomes with ISA and investment transfers in the UK. Before the arrival of TEX, it typically, I should say, took 120 days to transfer an investment, and it was done by paper, telephone, and checks. TEX introduced a whole series of open standards, a trust framework, and a regulatory checking regime that today sees the vast bulk of all investment transfers, in the UK. And those transfers now happen in specie and typically in seconds rather than days. And there's some strong lessons we've learned from TEX, and when I talk about Turn later. TEX currently covers over 75% of all assets under administration in the market and provides us a great starting base for Turn. Other projects TISA are involved in is open savings investment. This complements the open banking implementation entities' work in releasing information on bank accounts. An open savings investment project covers all other asset classes in the UK, whether it's pensions, investments, or even the debt you hold, and is complementary to open banking. The next initiative we're responsible for at TISA is the Digital ID for UK consumers. This initiative provides all the standards and the AML standards and government standards required to test an individual's identity online. Now, these projects have put us in an excellent position to support Turn, and I want to talk a bit more about Turn now and why we've done it. Okay. There you go. So the background to Turn is comes from a regulatory decision in 2018 when the regulators across Europe introduced what was called the European MIFiD II template. Now, this template is a requirement, a regulatory requirement for investment companies and their distributors to report the data relating to an investment to their end consumer. It's a very complex reporting standard, and it's one that I'm afraid to say many companies have not been able to satisfy completely. And if you think in the European market, there are over 130,000 different funds, ISINs as they're called, and over 1,000 different distributors who have to report via this template to their customers. You can imagine the number of interconnections between investment companies and distributors and how complex that will become. As a result, the ability for companies to conform to the requirement is complex, and we believe that the introduction of TURN, which we'll cover in a bit more in a second, will reduce the complexity, will improve the compliance with the standard, and very much improve the reporting to the client because they will get a consistent result, and it will save very significant amounts of money for the industry. These are all lessons we learned from TEX, and we intend to replicate the success of TEX in taking TURN forward. Now, the background to TURN started when our members approached us to say, we've got in place this new piece of regulation, can you help us adopt it in a consistent way? So we developed a number of user guides, which are now industry standards, and to support that, we actually went one step further and developed the downstream, upstream, and template reporting standards and published those as ISO standards. Now, those standards were then welcomed by our members, but they said, we'd very much like you to consider taking this next step and provide a solution. And as a result of that, with Atos' support, we run a very successful hackathon where we brought in some of the larger providers of blockchain solutions, and we proved that a solution could be delivered on blockchain. As a result of that, we went to tender, and I'm very pleased to say, in what was a hotly contested bid, Atos come out very strongly and has won the tender to deliver Atos. So TURN, which is the industry application, is based upon the ISO standards developed by TISA, and Atos will develop and deliver the solution. Okay. I can already say that the interest in the market is very, very significant, not only in the press, but even today we had major providers signing up to become members of TURN or use the TURN facility. So why are our members so interested in an industry-wide solution? Well, if you go back to the FCA's comments, you can see the comments on the screen here, but when the FCA say something like the rules are being inconsistently applied, that is a warning to the industry. And it's the same sort of warning that applied when TEX was formed. And the other thing that's happening is we've seen a number of setbacks or maybe failures in delivery. A number of major firms aren't able to report the template, or they report it inconsistently, or they report it with missing data. Now, in leading up to the decision to make or launch an industry solution, we polled the TISA membership, those 220 firms that I mentioned earlier. And overwhelmingly, they supported the development of an industry solution, and they supported the benefits that would come from that in reducing risk and costs, and while improving the quality of the consumer communications. As a result, we're here today. We're launching TURN to you as through this Atos Tech Day, and I'm very pleased to say that there's already great signs that the industry will accelerate the take-up of this solution. At that point, I'd like to hand over to Nikhil, who's the Global Head of Product Governance at Deutsche Bank, and he will talk a bit more about the challenges and the solutions that TURN will bring. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Adrian. It is great to be on this tech show conference, and I'd like to be sharing with you some of the key learnings that I've had as a practitioner in this space. First things first, if you happen to be a fund manager, a data vendor, an IFA platform, or a bank that distributes funds, I would be really grateful for your undivided attention. And the reason for that is we all have a common shared problem. And that problem is EU regulatory data. As David alluded prior to me starting this, you may all have heard of MIFiD EMT. You may have heard of PRIPS PPT. But guess what? There's more data coming your way in the form of sustainable finance. So the request and the product pipeline of data that is coming our way is relentless, and it's not receding, it's ever growing. So there is a major EU regulatory data problem that we all face. Why is it a problem, one may ask? First things, we have a problem in the data model. It is a problem of one to many to many. Why is that a problem, one might ask? One fund manager publishes information on one fund to several data vendors, and those several data vendors in turn publish the same information downstream to fund distributors. And if we were to look at the wires connecting all of these players, it's very inefficient data architecture, which in turn leads to higher costs, higher licensing costs, inefficiencies, and as a result, there are compliance risks that are borne by the end distributor. Imagine this. Fund manager X has published data. It's gone to fund manager Y. In some cases, it's gone to data vendor X. Data is going all over the place. By the time it reaches the fund distributor, several mistakes may have happened up the value chain, and no one's aware where the mistake may have arisen. But the reality is, it's the end distributor who ends up carrying the regulatory risk of mis-selling if they've used the wrong data to make a sales recommendation to an end investor. So why is TURN a solution? One may ask. We have a problem, and that is a problem of inefficiency and bad data model. But TURN is a solution. Why is that the case? Well, you may have heard blockchain till now was a solution looking for a problem. I think this initiative has fixed that, has reversed that statement. We finally have a problem of a European scale, maybe even a global scale, where we, through TURN, have created a decentralized utility, a blockchain owned by the industry, where the fund manager, I'd like to request you to turn your attention to the slide, there's a little diagram there, where a fund manager, a data vendor, a data agent, an IFA platform, and a distributing bank are all nodes on the same blockchain. And what does that result in? It results in some fundamental benefits, not just short-term, but also strategic benefits. Short-term benefits are data integrity, timeliness of data, and data architecture simplified. And because of these issues, we're expecting 7-figure cost reductions across the industry. That is a good thing. But best of all, we are also improving client outcomes. Because we have real-time data that we can trust, which has been delivered from the end manufacturer and the owner of that data, and has been provided in almost real time, fund distributors can rely on this data to come up with better investment decisions and ensure that they're servicing the customer from a compliance perspective, from a return of investment perspective, from a transparency perspective. These are really good regulatory conduct outcomes that the industry can benefit from. But that's not just the point. We're not just building a funds data platform for regulatory data. This venture has got more of a future. If you look at it strategically, we're not just stopping at funds. We will include other securities. And the reality is, as more and more data grows, is added to the ecosystem, as more and more financial services firms are added to the ecosystem, we will have greater coverage. And in the process, we would have built a pan-European information highway on which securities can be settled and traded in the future. And that is very exciting. That is game-changing. And I'm delighted to be part of this disruption of our industry, where we are not recreating the wheel, but we're basically taking a new wheel in the form of a blockchain node and then placing that on an existing data operating model, and in the process, solving huge problems for the industry. And that is very exciting. And I'd be welcoming you all to join this. And thank you again for giving me the time to present these ideas. I'm going to now hand over to Adrian. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nikhil. Thanks, David. I'd now quickly just like to take a moment to look at the technology that we're using to build TERN. As mentioned earlier, Atos ran a hackathon with TISA and market participants to better understand the problem statement, and from every single perspective of the industry participants as well. And also to understand if blockchain was a suitable technology for the platform. And we did. Our blockchain platform provides an ideal technology to solve the market's requirements. We were able to validate, for example, that it would provide a single source of truth for market participants, the ability to publish once and done. And of course, really high levels of security, an encrypted and distributed ledger with permissioning rights, full traceability and auditability. It's an immutable record, but it also has the ability to roll back the ledger in cases of error. And of course, validation at data points at entry using technology to automatically spot errors for crucial publication. And agreed standards and templates, so a consistent approach for all participants on the blockchain. And straight through processing of changes, so automatic uploads to APIs. And of course, crucially, the ability to scale quickly. So we've got suitable infrastructure that will enable the building of this future roadmap into further and future areas of regulation, as Nikhil's talked about. So not just EMT, but PRIPS or ESG, etc. Now, shortly, we're going to be talking more about the solution after the Q&A when Ivo presents us with a demo of the solution. But just finally, to finish off on, what I'd also like to talk about is what we've also learned is that in order to reach a market adoption tipping point, TERN had to be a neutral digital platform. Therefore, TISA's sponsorship of TERN was absolutely crucial to turning this into an industry utility where maximum collective value could be realized by all participants. Many other blockchain projects have failed in the past because they're built by companies who expect other industry participants to suddenly stop competing and start cooperating, which is simply, in many cases, unrealistic, and why many similar initiatives have failed. So not just in financial services, but across other markets, you can expect to hear a lot more about neutral digital platforms in future. And of course, TISA needed a strong partner to help build and develop the platform. With our deep expertise in securely operating critical infrastructure, Atos were the ideal choice. And as we launched the service to market, which we have done over the course of the last few days, the overwhelmingly positive feedback we're receiving from major asset managers and market-leading distributors is demonstrating the power of the partnership between TISA and Atos. Now, that concludes the formal part of the presentation. Thanks again to David and Nikhil for their presentation. I'm just going to see if we received any questions while we've been speaking. If none have been submitted, then please feel free to ask any. I believe we may have some to start off already. Let's just start off with, there's just a question mark as to how well this has been received by the market today. David, do you just want to make a quick comment on that?
Yes, I removed my earbuds, by the way, because I was getting terrible echo. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, the initial response from the press was tremendous. We've had over 15 articles with the journalists following up our launch very quickly, and we have follow-up interviews with Reuters and a number of major publications coming up now. In terms of organisations signing up, we have one of the largest investment managers in the world who signed up this morning, and they run a very large digital platform with many millions of customers on that platform, and that provides us a significant chunk of UK retail funds coverage through that one link. We expect other major digital platforms to support this, and the good news on the institutional side, the largest institutional platforms are now in the process of discussing joining and using the application as well. And as Adrian said, this is complementary to their businesses. It doesn't create any competition, but what it does do is remove that risk and costs. And as with techs, we expect once the large platforms are on board, who distribute most of the funds, it is very quick to see the other major providers fall in line. And with techs, it took us 6 months to get the penetration that we required across the market to make it a complete solution. This is shaping up along the same lines and even quicker. Hopefully that answers the question. I can't name any names, I'm afraid, because we are under NDAs, but we do have the signatures starting this morning.
We do. You're quite right, David. Thank you. That's a great answer. We've also got another question here around in which countries this will be launched, and I think I can maybe cover that one off myself. So we're starting off really with an MVP for EMT data in the UK, first of all, but our ambitions are very, very quickly to extend this to the rest of Europe. MIFiD II, by its very nature, is an EU regulation, and so it's specific to markets that operate within the EC, and of course the UK too. And so that's primarily the scope of this project. But David and I have also had conversations with other geographies where they face similar problems. It's not quite the same as MIFID, but nonetheless, there's a similar type of problem. So yes, absolutely, both TISA and Atos are looking at the applicability of this in other wider geographies outside of the EU. I've got another question here about data agents and data vendors, and I think I'm going to turn to Nikhil's expertise here. But the question is around, many of these data vendors are already collecting much of this data. So does this represent a threat to their business model?
It represents an opportunity to their business model to simplify and add value to the end customers and their financial services organizations that they're partnering with. So it does represent an opportunity primarily, but it also does represent a threat to those data vendors who do not necessarily add any unique analytics data to the ecosystem. So both a threat and an opportunity, but it's the early adopters who see this as an opportunity rather than wait till it becomes a threat. That'll benefit a lot from this initiative by being part of this initiative. We already have some leading data vendors who are pan-European, very strong in the fund space, who are part of this initiative. So they're very supportive of this already. And this is a great example of how they're seizing this opportunity rather than waiting for this initiative to turn into a strategic threat to their business.
Thanks, Nikhil. One further question around the cost savings to participants in the industry, and I can answer this particular question. I think there is significant benefit for all participants in the industry to join this blockchain, be they small niche asset managers or the biggest distributors. What our research at TISA has indicated that many companies are spending an inordinate amount of money on the collection and dissemination of this data. They're needing to subscribe to many different data feeds, but also the sheer inefficiency of checking and collecting data and having to rework stuff when it's been done incorrectly is very, very difficult, particularly those those distributors and those IFAs that people like you and I rely on to make sure that our portfolios are correct and that we've been charged an appropriate amount of money. And in many cases, we've heard that although we're in the very, very initial stages of rolling out the platform, it will already lead to many significant tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds being saved by particularly some of the biggest vendors. But actually, when we move towards our future roadmap and the vision that we're developing with TISA, then many of the biggest asset managers globally and distributors are telling us that those cost savings individually could be in the many millions of pounds. So collectively, the benefit of the industry is quite significant. But the clear purpose and vision of this, it isn't just for the benefits of the participants. What's fundamentally important is providing a better, more transparent service to individual investors like you and I. Unless there's any other questions.
I completely agree.
Thanks, Nikhil. And I think unless there's any other further questions, I think we will pull this to a close, and I think we will move on to the demo of Turn with Evo. Thank you all for attending. It's been a real pleasure. Please feel free to contact us offline if you've got any questions about Turn. We'd be very happy to discuss them.
Thank you all.